Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a dork living in Portland, Oregon who spent too many years listening to podcasts and not doing anything creative. This is my attempt to rectify that, to create and contribute something where I talk to people about their cultural obsessions and try to give some recommendations of my own. Welcome to Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person. Speaking of decades happening within weeks, as well as trying to achieve power, have you ever read anything written by Jonathan Matthew Smucker? He wrote a book called Hegemony How To. Came out like last year.
I know of the book, and I've meant to read it. I follow him on Twitter. He seems really great.
I haven't. Well, actually, no. Amy has my hard copy of it, but I was gonna say I have a hard copy of it around here somewhere. I just realized I lent it to my friend who is actually currently at the camp right now. So
that guy, based on the tweets I see and have interacted with, he's rooted in the tradition of organizing. From those who've read the book, they've kind of confirmed that. But he's thoroughly, all his ideas come from like deep organizing perspective.
Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that he in Hegemony How To, which I put out by, I believe, AK Press, was one of the recommendations on this show last year. But he talked about how, because I think the book came out of a few essays that he wrote in response to just the failures of Occupy, and getting back to both the need but also the popular failure to talk about power. That one of the issues, one of the limitations of Occupy, like he saw, was just that we had plenty of mass turnout, but it was never sharpened. It was never, it was almost assumed that, hey, we just have people showing up here. Here's this is our our theory of change is just we got people to show up in kind of like what prefiguring, living in this prefigured, kind of like here we'll act as we want society to become. And then, question mark, then, and then finally, there's the revolution. But one of the things I want to bring up is, if you could talk about how do you use something like an Occupy camp, which is very topical, into as a way to organize people, or hell, even radicalized, I guess. But it's just, what can you have if you with an Occupy camp, because we have one currently going on in Portland.
The debate in Washington, D.C. continues. In southwest Portland, protesters against ICE are camped out just outside the offices for the 11th day. And this comes as the Portland City Council had a public meeting with several immigrants' rights groups, including the Democratic Socialists of America.
Assuming this episode gets posted before it gets rated, and the way that shit ain't gonna get better, which means that there's gonna be another round of them coming within who knows how many years. How do you take that and how do you organize people from there into something beyond just a camp?
Can I ask just a little clarification on your question?
Sure.
Are you talking about how to radicalize people sort of watching the camp from the outside? Because certainly the people in the camp are pretty rad already. Like,
where do you take a camp? How do you orientate people into, instead, like I said, we're operating out of the previous model is the virtuous, personal, moral, radical liberal action. How do you get people to start moving in collective forms from there? How do you organize them towards, something beyond from there after this outpouring of whatever you want to call it? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, okay, to use two axioms to start with, if organizing is one definition of organizing is moving power from them to us.
Mm-hmm.
If that's a premise. Another premise on top of that is Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand.
Right.
So we want power to concede things to us. We need demands to do that. You have to take whatever is happening and formulate demands based on what is happening. And I think DSA did a great job of this recently when we went to City Council and made some demands on City Council based on the activities of the camp.
Mm-hmm. Along with the Direct Action Alliance, I believe there.
Pete, Nora, members of the DSA actually presented a list of demands today to the City Council, including how the city should handle the occupation here of this ICE building in southwest Portland. Demonstrators have been here now for 11 days. They say they're not moving despite receiving notices from federal agents to vacate on Monday and again on Tuesday.
We are here to let Portland City Council know that we will not stand idly by while they look the other way and do nothing to stop Portland from being complicit in ICE's actions.
Strong words today from the Portland Democratic Socialists of America, the group questioning the city council regarding its stance on immigration and policing.
We are in a crisis right now, and we wanted to let city council know that there are specific concrete steps they can take to stop ICE's presence in Portland.
Kat B. Smith presented a list of demands on behalf of the DSA. The organization is asking the commissioners to establish an Office of Immigrants' Rights here in Portland and fully fund legal defense services for undocumented immigrants seeking asylum. It's also asking the city to withdraw from the Joint Terrorism Task Force, a multi-agency unit that ICE is a part of.
The city of Portland cannot participate in the JTTF and call itself a sanctuary city.
Another demand that the city of Portland not cooperate with federal agencies in clearing demonstrators currently occupying the ICE building in Southwest Portland. Mayor Ted Wheeler has already publicly stated Portland police will not help if federal agents were to attempt to sweep.
Yeah, different groups.
And so the camp itself had a demand, like, get ICE out of Portland. And I think that was a great demand. And the sub-activity, those people occupying, that made national news and inspired people from across the country to do that. It seemed initially they would win their demand. Now it does not seem that way. ICE is back. The feds are there. You risk a long jail sentence if you get arrested by them. So that demand, is coming into conflict with the reality. The other demands DSA made, one of them is for the city to end its relationship with the Joint Terrorism Task Force.
Yep. Which we had for a while, dropped out of, and then rejoined for some reason.
Right, and I think that demand is entirely achievable. Like in very soon, actually.
I think they'll get that. I think if they keep
so
going,
too.
they'll get it.
Yeah.
Hey folks, this is Jeremy just popping in here. If you like what you're hearing, why not help us make the show? You can support us for as little as $1 a month, donated through our Patreon, which is at patreon.com/givingthemic. Every little bit helps. Thanks.
So I think that's, to answer your question, like, every time anything happens ever, an organizer thinks, what is the demand? How do we take this and funnel the energy into a demand and win that demand? Because so often as an Occupy, people rightly criticized, myself included, like, without demands, this energy will dissipate.
Yeah.
The demand is like, this funneling the steam to the engine. That is the pistons.
Right.
That is how you funnel power to achieve objectives. So an organizer always thinks first, what is the demand here? And is this, and now the demands that DSA made are the demands at the camp as well. The camp wants those demands.
Good.
The city knows about those demands. The city commissioners, Chloe Daly, has talked about those demands at length and supports them. So I guess that's the answer. Like, that's the organizer mind, is, that's part of it's being comfortable with power. There's power here. How do we move it to actually achieve success? And a lot of people on the left, they don't think about power in that way. They aren't comfortable with power. They might not know this explicitly, but implicitly they think themselves to be powerless. They think that the power dynamic is unchanging, and thus what you can achieve is, just these
modest improvements.
Well, or not even that, are just like outbursts of righteousness and anger.
Right. You only have the performative aspect of
the act.
Well, and it's like the sort of, radical, I don't know what you'd call her, philosopher Judith Butler, in her book Gender Trouble, she kind of made it seem like, and I'm no expert, so please don't at me or whatever. She kind of made it seem like all you could do is sort of play around the edges of gender, and we had to just sort of accept that, which is always a misgiving I had with her as a writer, was like there was no radical plan or even like hope or potentiality that I feel like there's a lot of that, especially in the sort of bourgeois academic left, you know what I mean, that really kind of sits on their couches as well, and they're all much smarter than the rest of us, but they don't seem to have the heart, you know what I mean?
The extent that people will avoid talking or dealing with power is impressive.
Yeah.
And that gets to so much of the issue that the left faces often, is they don't want to deal with power dynamics or, changing the balance of power. You're very content talking about things
In the abstract.
but never like, okay, here's how we do this.
And it always comes down to personal conviction or personal shame or whatever it is, you know, to try to get to get things to change. It's never about, you know, like using power, like we need to wrench this from there to here. You know what I mean? We need power. We need energy for that.
Yeah. The only lever is the only what do you call it? Theory of change? I don't know. The only like lever that will work is that either will work or has been utilized popularly anymore is just on a moralizing on a vast scale.
And these are people that don't actually believe a revolution is possible. If you ask the average person who calls themselves a revolutionary, if you ask them, do you think a revolution is possible in your lifetime? They will say no, which means they don't think it's possible. They can't even conceive it happening, period.
Yeah.
Maybe sometime in thousands of years from now,
Right.
it could be a thing. And that's really how they're operating. They're operating from that perspective.
That's a good point.
They're rooted in that reality. And so their strategy is going to flow from that premise.
If you don't think it's possible in your lifetime, like, it's just not possible in a sense, because
And so what are you doing here?
Right.
What game are you playing? I would suggest that, to me, it's painfully obvious, more so every day, that things are changing incredibly fast. 3 years ago, we could not conceive of a Trump-Bernie dynamic. The world today is vastly different than 3 years ago. And a year from now, it's going to be a lot different. That's how fast things are changing. A revolution, I think, is inevitable. And we can talk about what that means as far as a revolution goes. But I think a revolutionary mass movement, I'll define it like that.
Yeah.
In general,
An awakening of sorts. Like I think it's possible.
It's not only possible, to me. It seems inevitable very soon.
Man.
Based on the current trajectory of change in this country, things are changing so fast, and humans have like a conservative element of their psyche which really adjusts to change very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And after they adjusted to the Bernie phenomenon, which shifted the entire country to the left, people then said, nothing ever changes. No, very obviously things have changed dramatically. And maybe not in material conditions so much, but the precondition for that, which is consciousness, is shifting massively.
Right. I think that's absolutely true. And that, when I get bummed out about the Supreme Court, I have to think about that sort of thing, because Supreme Court could be irrelevant 10, 15 years from now. You know what I mean?
5 years from now.
5. Wow. You're optimistic, my man.
Well, I'm not even trying to be optimistic. I'm just saying from a pure math perspective, if you deal with calculus, which I definitely don't, but calculus is...
Jeremy's taking calculus, I bet.
I've had too many math. You remember
Did you do a proof of whatever he says?
Hell no, I hated geometry. No, I took, I was an engineering major. I took too many applied math classes, which are applied math and applied physics classes, which is what engineering is.
Well, in physics is, that's the calculus. This is how things change. Mm-hmm. And so if you take the trajectory of change that we're on right now from the last 4 years alone, and let's assume that same level of change continues for 5 years. Very hard to imagine where that is.
Right.
And I'm saying if that continues, the current level of change happens in 5 years, that's, to me, there's a revolutionary movement already happening.
Right.
I guess when I think about what I thought was kind of rad, let's say 15 years ago versus what I think is radical now, it is so different.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It was, it's almost embarrassing to talk about, but I would think I'm trying to think of remember Cindy Sheehan?
Sure, of course.
I was like, wow, this man, she was cool, but that's a whole different, that's really still working within the system. Well, and then it's wow, going from there to where. So you make a good point. I I don't necessarily have the bird's eye view maybe that you have of it. So,
well, and
so that's what makes it harder for me.
And again, like we get in myself every day, I kind of have to remind myself, because otherwise you do get stuck in the here and now. Oh my God, Trump did so many shitty things the last week, and they are shitty and worrisome. But you do have to take into consideration, holy shit, on Saturday there was a nationwide action where hundreds of cities, hundreds of thousands of people came out in the streets in opposition to that shittiness.
And that's like comfortable suburban people doing it. You know what I mean? Up to a large degree, which is pretty cool.
And so think about the Women's March that happened after Trump was elected, and all the protests that happened after he was elected. For millions of people, literally,
yep,
that was their first ever protest.
Right.
Like half my workplace.
Well, all those people shutting down airports, I mean, let's not forget that. That was actually pretty enormous. Now that you're getting me really stoked now, I'm thinking of all that.
What happened at your workplace?
Well, just that if you take Bernie and the Women's March, you had like a majority of a workplace that was apolitical the prior year become radicalized. These I work mainly with working class women who have kids, and seeing them evolve very quickly into fanatical Bernie supporters going to the Women's March. They're experiencing politics directly for the first time in a way that has changed their lives.
And a lot of people who thought they were politically conservative are like, no, I like what Bernie's saying, which I think is one of the most interesting things.
Well, that makes my point even more clear. Like, that is how deep things have changed so fast, and there's no sign this will stop anytime soon. We're not going to just, okay, the change has stopped. No, we're not in a period where that is the case. All we have before is ever more change, and an organizer has to look at that road ahead and say, okay, what are the possible challenges? How do we confront these obstacles or opportunities? Every change is either an opportunity. Oh, it's both a threat and opportunity.
Yeah, there are two outcomes. It's opportunity or a threat. Socialism or barbarism, folks. It's and we already got plenty of barbarism here.
I have maybe a sort of question that might generate something.
Go for it.
So let's say someone's listening to this podcast, and
I hope someone does.
You know, they have their own life context. You know, and whether their politics are left or not, what are, you know, like we all live in the context of a neighborhood, for example. Like, how do we organize in our neighborhood?
We live in a society.
Yeah, like, because that's something that I'm actually really curious about. I want to know my neighbors better. And besides going to like neighborhood council meetings, like I wanted to organize in my neighborhood about X. You know what I mean? Like where do you start? You know, all that jazz. Maybe the neighborhood council meeting's the best place to start. I don't know.
You know, I'm a bad person to ask about this.
Well, then don't answer the question.
Well, I'll tell you why I have a built-in bias against neighborhood organizing.
Okay.
What, just this town or just overall?
My experience is this town, so I can only speak to that. But I have seen so many people try different attempts at organizing with their neighbors. And for whatever reason, it always kind of goes off the rails very quickly. Mm-hmm. And if Margot were here, she would say, likely, that a built-in barrier is home ownership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Home ownership means, fuck you, I got mine, and my interest is my home and my career that supports my home.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of off the market when it comes to organizing potential.
Full disclosure, I own a home. And I past 3 years, let's say, I've been wrestling with, I think part of my reticence to dive in, so to speak, is probably an unconscious anchor to that you know, that tie.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So organizing is about, at the core of organizing is, what do we agree on? And that's where we start. And that goes back to identifying the issues. You're organizing around agreements on issues you care about. So your neighbors, for example, you knock on doors. Let's say you're only knocking on doors of homeowners. Mm-hmm. What do you want to change? Well,
property taxes.
I was gonna say that. Most likely, that'll be the issue.
Right.
And it's possible that you could,
I hate that. That makes me feel gross. I don't want to organize on property taxes.
I mean, first of all,
like
that's
Grover
not
Norquist.
That's not a local issue. That's a city or state issue.
Yeah.
So that's a barrier right there. But like, people.
Or they'll be like, how do we get all these homeless people out of our neighborhood? Or whatever.
That'll definitely be on the agenda as well.
I know.
So you have all these contradictions, and like you said, like there's this, like, you're rooted in your home, and that is a barrier, and that is, I would argue, like the core support for the establishment is those people who, not all people, but people who own their homes.
They have literally bought in.
There you go. Well said. And that is the purpose of having a society built around home ownership, or the aspiration to own a home, even if you're never going to own a home.
Right.
The dream.
Yeah, workers don't strike when they own their own property.
Right.
They own their own homes.
And
yeah.
so
I heard David Harvey say that years ago.
Right. And that's so true. And that's intentional as a base of support for the government. Keep these people pacified. I guess so that's to me perhaps the biggest barrier for neighborhood organizing. You presume you have a connection with your neighbors, but really do you? And this goes back to the concept of community. What is community? And in left circles, you hear about this all the time. We got to build community. And there's a very well-intentioned component of that. And some of that is like, yes, we have to break out of alienation. Absolutely, we have to do that. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's an abstract community that we can create just outside of politics. I think
communities are about ascription, right? Like to a certain degree, like we decide to be a community together, whether we're in the same geographical location or not.
And I would argue that what really binds people together in a real way is struggle. So if you will want to avoid struggle and build community upon what foundation? Well, we live kind of close to each other.
Yeah, just locality, proximity, and that's about it.
Yeah, and you might find a neighbor that you connect with on individual hobbies or this or that.
Yeah.
We think we're funny, together, and that happens for sure. But an abstract community, I don't. That's always kind of the sorcerer's stone people are trying to find and never quite finding. Whereas you'll find at a workplace there's a built-in community.
Right.
Even, we all have the same experiences every day. We hate the fucking boss. We want higher wages. And the struggle to achieve those things, that creates a camaraderie that is real community.
Right.
Through struggle, I learned to trust you because my fate depends on your actions. And your inactions affect me. So that's, I think, the highest level of organizing is people become radicalized through struggle. For example, landlord-tenant. If you are scared of your landlord, which most renters are, and you organize against your landlord and you win, you go from powerlessness to powerful. Mm-hmm. And you go from no community to community. We have people now, I didn't know their names last week or last month, and all of a sudden we're like best friends. We got each other's back. That level of solidarity is real community, which isn't created out of the abstract. It's created through struggle.
Yeah, but let's say, I don't know. Let's say you're violently successful, and not that violence took place, but you had a critical hit, as they would say in Dungeons and Dragons parlance, and you don't have to struggle anymore. Like, does that dissolve the community?
Well,
it can.
It definitely can.
Is that is that like kind of what happened in the United States? We had this, the real radical agitation in the 30s, and then everyone got kind of fat and lazy, and then now we're living in the fallout of that. I mean, I guess that's a pretty.
Well, there's a core component of truth about that.
Pardon me one moment.
Not that you have to have every answer to every question with regard to this, but it's just that's a thought that arose to me, that if we're defining community by struggle, if there's an end to struggle, then there's an end to community.
Well, and so this begs the question, like, what is the goal?
Right. Where does it stop?
Yeah.
If you're never done, I guess.
Yeah, and
there's always a little bit to make better.
Right, and there's definitely, and this also marks the difference between a revolutionary and a non-revolutionary. If the end of my struggle is I just want that wage increase,
Right.
then I might be out of the game for a long time. Although, one of the tenets of Marxism is that capitalism creates crisis.
Right.
And every crisis, it's inevitable, first of all. And, and that, again, poses the question of what now? It's, so in the States, every 10 years, there's a recession. It's
right.
on a timer almost.
Yeah.
And the last one was 2008.
And we're fixing to get to the next one, it seems like.
Well, we're in a sense overdue. And then that question is then posed again. Like, what do we do now? Like, what next? And I think that's a key distinction of revolutionary is, well, we can be locked in this, this forever struggle of crisis, and scarcity, and
I see what you're saying. Yeah, go on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, or we can have another vision that we can fight for, and and the states have been exceptional in a sense in that there hasn't been a revolutionary period here. Well, you could argue that the post World War II upsurge was a pre-revolutionary situation, but most of the countries have had real revolutions post World War II. The biggest upsurge in world history, revolutionary-wise, was the anti-colonial upsurge post World War II. Literally, over 100 countries probably had revolutions that kicked out the colonial oppressors,
right.
all over Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, and we, to us, that seems impossible that could ever happen here. Whereas most of the countries, that's in their living memory,
Right.
Any other points you want to cover? Or because one of the things I did want to ask at some point is for tips or sources or books or something that where people who are really want to know more what they should go check out. Or you have any?
Well, when in terms of just raw organizing, which I think we're talking about mostly is the Godfather Saul Alinsky. And his Rules for Radicals is kind of like, the Bible in some ways.
You guys were saying Saul Alinsky earlier. I thought you were saying Solinsky, like just using a person's last name. Oh, boy, I'm embarrassed. All right, guys, I'm going home.
So
please edit my name out of this episode, Jeremy.
That's a fine book. I mentioned earlier there's a pamphlet called Axioms for Organizers. That's just like one sentence, statements about organizing that you can read every day and apply it to organizing in a new way. And Jeremy mentioned Jane McAlevey, No Shortcuts. She has several books, but
No Shortcuts, Organizing for Power in the New Gilded Age.
So she really gets to the core of a lot of this stuff. She's a seasoned organizer with a ton of experience, and reading her book exposes so much of the problems of the left and their lack vision and outlook around organizing. And one of my favorites I'll mention is Teamster Rebellion by Farrell Dobbs. He was a Marxist who helped lead the Minneapolis General Strike in 1934. And the beauty of that book is, and there's a whole series of Teamster books that he wrote, is he just walks you through step by step, what they did, how they did it. And you really learn strategy. He's like, we encountered this problem, and then we thought about it, and we did this. And it's constant problem solving, and that is a key component of organizing. We have a problem, how do we solve it? How do we get into a mindset of all being problem solvers and not rely on any one person to be that person? Let's all try to develop a problem solving mentality, whether it be in the organization, we need to fix this or that problem. Let's all try to identify problems and solve them. And that cultural change in DSA is going to lay the groundwork for a lot of good organizing that will take place, I think.
Awesome.
I can dig it.
You ever read anything about Drum?
That's the auto workers.
The Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, which I just found out has actually happened 50 years ago last month.
I have read some. It's funny. There's people who believe. Who was the other group that existed along that time? There were two militant revolutionary.
It was League of Revolutionary Black Workers.
Yes,
I think
that's the other one. Yes,
Bill Fletcher Jr. talks about that one.
Yeah.
League of Revolutionary Black Workers originally came out of consolidation of organizations such as DRUM, which is Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement, LRUM, which is the Eldon Avenue, Gary and Axel, which is Eldon Revolutionary Union Movement, FRUM, which is the Ford Revolutionary Union Movement, comes out of the Fort Rouge complex, and UPRUM, which is United Parcel Revolutionary Union Movement. Basically, Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement was the beginning of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. DRUM started from a grievance that the black workers had.
At the time, they were running 56 units or automobiles an hour on the line. There was no additional help. Workers were doing almost twice as much work one day as they were doing the day before. You know, the foreman on the line, he has obligation to see that his section runs smoothly, and a lot of times, you know, they'll notice defective automobiles going down the line. You know, all he wants to do is get it the hell out of his area. You know, get that car out on the street. You know, and edit by any means necessary. This is when we begin to realize we were in a twofold struggle. We soon started making demands that it would seem that the UAW should have been making, such as the demands on the production standards, the overtime. Workers were beginning to question just who did the UAW represent, the workers or the corporation.
So those two groups, a lot of people to this day blame on like the failure of the auto industry in the States.
No shit.
Yeah, to this day.
Of course, it's the workers' fault.
Right.
It's and of course it's the black workers' fault.
Yes,
Right.
Yes.
Right.
The double scapegoat.
You know, black people just wanted too much, too fast.
When you have this getting along, naturally it serves to eliminate some of the labor problems that we were faced with back in the early years of unionism. And with the elimination of those problems, it means for regular working. You don't have the wildcat stoppages, the strikes and what have you. I don't think there's any doubt about the fact that as the automotive industry goes, so goes the city of Detroit. So goes this country, more or less. Naturally, we lose money when we are not working. So it's the best. Getting along certainly eliminates the lost time that is not necessary as far as we are concerned.
So part of the slander is that, you know, you demand too high wages, you drive people out of the market. There's an element of truth in that, in terms of like profitability.
Yeah.
You've caused a profitability crisis, and capitalism produces only for profit. So, on that part of the critique, that may have some truth in it. Less investors if there's less profits.
Right, but that also depends on a system of international sovereign nations that can undercut each other competitively within a capitalist market. Do you know what I mean? But anyway, go on. I'm sorry.
Well, the other piece, the other critique of those two groups is that they stop production so consistently. They were like, "Oh, you disciplined Jimmy, we shut down the plant."
Yeah,
and that was happening. Like, this is like top level militant organizing, and so the critique is like they couldn't produce in a way that was consistent or predictable, and they had to move, or they had to like doubly attack the union and get rid of these folks because it was just like too obstructive to production.
It was hurting people's ability to consume, and for some reason consumption is an absolutely unreputable, moral position of human activity. Like, you know what I mean? Like what they're getting in the way of us consuming. You know?
I mean, it begs the question also, like, who rules the workplace?
Right.
You know, and when the workers are so obviously in charge, the capitalists have a real crisis.
Right.
Their job is to implement, conditions, and a union's job is to defend the workers. But there becomes a point where, like, they go from defense to offense. Mm-hmm. Like, we are in complete control. And that's kind of what happened. And the capitalists were like, holy shit, this is completely out of control. We've lost all control of the workplace. So we're going to burn it all down.
Yeah,
that's all they can do, right?
I was kind of wondering what would have happened had George Meany either never gotten in charge or had gotten kicked out about 1968, 1969.
Are you referring to like the anti-radical, anti-militant unionism piece of it, or?
I think part of it was because
tell the people who George Meany is.
Good evening. Tonight my guest is AFL-CIO Chairman George Meany, who will be discussing collective bargaining agreements.
It's a pleasure to be here, Krusty.
Let me be blunt. Is there a labor crisis in America today?
Well, that depends what you mean by crisis.
George Meany was I think he was the head of the teams. Well, no, not the teams. The UAW during definitely from like the Johnson to like the Nixon administration.
Labor delegates representing 16 million workers gather in New York for the history-making merger of the American Federation of Labor and the Congress of Industrial Organizations. The merger is the culmination of 20 years of effort. Symbolically, Walter Reuther, CIO president, and George Meany, AFL president, declare the meeting open jointly to thunderous applause. The meeting, however, reaches its climax with the nomination of officers for the new AFL-CIO organization, largest in the world. Walter Reuther nominates George Meany as president and is himself named one of the 37 vice presidents.
And I think one of the reasons why, one of the many reasons why, especially in the late 60s when you had a lot more, it's like, after the left had kind of gone into universities because, they had kicked out all of their, all the unions had kind of kicked out all their leftists. And a lot of the universities were rallying around, the anti-war movement. And George Meany was not anti-war, and I think forbade union member, the rank and file from participating in anti-war movements. So it's one of the reasons why, you had.
So he was a more square union leader.
It goes way beyond more square. He was full on I don't even remember how. I don't even think.
Do you want to say reactionary?
I think part of it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But he was one of the reasons why, because if. It's one of the reasons why, late 60s radical left movements were deliberately split with, say, more union groups, because a lot of the unions were already, like I said, by that point had gotten comfortable off of their gains, but also a lot of them were much more, they weren't anti-war. They had 15 to 20 years of anti-communism, beaten into them in that. So they weren't exactly going to be protesting a war that we were fighting the communists. This is we're way out of my subject matter area here. This is
way more about it than I do.
This is sub Wikipedia, and this is me reading a copy of.
Don't apologize. It's all right.
Of Max Elbaum's Revolution in the Air.
Well, let me bring that to organizing and with the unions. A union, all a union is workers at a work site. That's all it is at its heart. And so you organize around agreements, and the agreements typically arise from the conditions at the work site. Wages, benefits, working conditions are the core of what a union is for. To defend yourself from the boss, to get some basic living standards. So to expect a union to be revolutionary is a bit of an unfair expectation. And they typically only happen when there's an upsurge society-wide. So, and even so, a union is just working people. My coworkers don't identify themselves as union members. They happen to belong to a union as well. They are apolitical people for the most part. So to demand them to adopt revolutionary slogans is kind of silly,
True.
So, but yes, a union gives you an opportunity to engage people, to educate people, to push them that direction, which it should do. But ultimately, these, are just average people. So I kind of think about that a lot when I think about people criticizing unions for this or that reason. Many criticisms are valid, but again, I think of my coworkers. I know I've engaged with thousands of people in my union. And most people are just trying to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you define or give an example of workerism?
I have no idea what that means.
You ever heard of worker-isms? Worker-ism?
I might have heard of that concept. Is that that's a left jargony concept?
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. It's everything I've ever heard is workerism is kind of like almost a fetishistic embrace of the working class as like revolutionary subject.
Yeah.
And it's which has been going around since at least Christ, this was in the late 60s where, what was it, like a bunch of like trot groups were telling their own members like, okay, here, we're going to have you salt these workplaces and enter in, so you have to like stop doing drugs and cut your hair, not realizing the fact that the actual, people who were in the workplaces were all, were long hairs, doing drugs.
Well, by that definition, I am also a workerist, I suppose.
Well, there's a fetish, because I think there's like a fetishistic aspect to it. It's like over imbuing, the employee as
the agent of change.
Yeah, it's some. There's something. Yeah, like I don't know a full definition of it. It's popped up in a couple. It's in a couple of our episodes that we've talked about before with like other guests, but.
I just want to say that I'm not familiar with the term workerism either, but there's a couple of comparative political philosophy books that I've read. One by a guy named Will Kimleika. He's a sort of Canadian political philosopher, and he's very much of the sort of like John Rawls sort of. I don't know if you guys know, but a school of political philosophy, and so he's a liberal. I mean, he's a liberal basically is what you'd call him, and his criticism of Marx is kind of on the workerist, using work as the basis of how you organize or arrange a society. I don't think he's right, but I think that a lot of regular ass people reading what he's saying would go like, yeah, you guys esteem the worker way too high, because there are people that can't work, for example.
Yeah.
Like that's one criticism. And I was years and years ago, I was at an ISO meeting checking out ISO to see if it was an organization I wanted to be. It was probably like 10 years ago. And I said that I said, there are going to be people who don't want to work, and there are going to be people who can't work. And what do you do about that? And I got something about how I was being ableist. That was the criticism levied against me, that I was basically saying that like people with physical disabilities wouldn't be able to work, and thus like would not be cherished in our society. I'm like, no, you just take care of those people. You know what I mean? So that's my experience of a sort of workerist mentality, if you will.
Well, I'll say as a workerist myself, apparently.
I know I'm misusing the term.
That's fine. It's fine. Let's misuse it together.
It's a safe space.
I feel like when I ask somebody what they do for a living, that tells me much more information than anything else about that person every single time. And in this culture, we shy from that profoundly. I'm not just my job. Well, yeah, of course you're not. But it tells me a lot of information. Whereas your hobbies tell me only a little bit about who you are. What you do for a living really defines so much about your total social existence. Mm-hmm. Who your friends likely are, where you likely live, who you relate to on a daily basis.
Yeah, part of a material analysis. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. Yeah, deeply rooted. Where you shop. I know so many things about you instantly when you tell me where you work or don't work. And if you don't work, either you're disabled, which is fine, or you got money somehow.
Yeah.
And that tells me a lot as well about who you are.
Or you're like Charles Bukowski.
So yeah.
It tells a lot, but only like in one particular case. Yeah.
Right. I know he's an outlier. Listeners, Charles Bukowski is an outlier.
And also, like, and when it comes to politics, like in DSA, or as things kind of get heated socially, and folks join DSA, what do you do for a living? I'm in between jobs right now. Okay, well, I'd feel a lot more comfortable knowing, how you can afford not to work. Maybe you're an FBI agent.
Yeah, good point.
It's a lot easier to know you're not when I can see you at Fred Meyer working. There's that piece to it. I really know who you are better when you have a job. And so when it comes to like the agent and change piece, I believe that we're not going to ever win the revolution until we have the broader population engaged in politics.
Yeah.
And that means all my coworkers. And because I have a union, I have a way to engage them politically.
Do you think that's where people should start? Just talking to your coworkers about their problems? Or you say, hey, here's a problem I have. Do you have this problem, basically? Like,
I mean, you're going to talk about work regardless at work. You know, you're going to, and you're all going to have a similar experience to some extent.
Right.
So, yeah, talk to your coworkers. Different jobs are going to be amenable or not to like having a union. But I mean, just being at work, you don't want to be like so isolated. You want to have some camaraderie with your coworkers.
Right.
If you have contact with anyone, hopefully you do. You know, but yeah, like as a way to judge where we are on the path to social change, gauging where your coworkers are pretty important.
Yeah,
these are apolitical people for the most part. Hopefully, I want everybody organized. I want everybody radicalized, and my immediate periphery is a place I can have effect on. So, in that sense, I'm a workerist.
Right.
Do either of you guys have anything you've been digging on lately that you would like to share with the viewing audience?
You go first.
Okay, I can go first. I actually have a short stack now that I keep thinking about it. I read an interesting. I'll start with the most boring thing. It's a pretty interesting academic article called "Constitutional Hardball." It's by an author named Mark Tushnet, and he's a Stanford political scientist or something to that effect. I found it really interesting, and at very least, it's something we should be able to like hand to the fucking Democrats that are actually in power at the moment. And say, try this, like try doing this. Another thing, I went and watched. This is my very normie recommendation. The new documentary about Mr. Rogers, and I was weeping almost the whole time. It was very good. And you want to talk about someone with a firm moral center and conviction that could, you know, even though they make a point to say in the movie he was a lifelong Republican.
Weird.
Yeah, it is really weird. I thought the exact same thing. If more people thought like him, I feel like we would have a something close to an idyllic society. That was quite good and quite moving. What else? I'm going to mention this, the second season of The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu. You can watch that. The only reason I say that, because I think it actually pertains to the conversation we're having, because that's a show that shows you a society in which the rules are really strange and everyone has to follow them, and even when they're revolting against one another, because it's a lot about revolt when you watch it. But they still have to do it within these weird rules that we look, and these rules were in place like 100 years ago, let's say. I don't know. I'm no expert on this stuff, but showing you how these dominant, submissive relationships within society work, and how weird they are. And if we could train ourselves to go, oh, why do we all think that this person deserves power over us? That show shows you how weird these rules can be. And if we can think about how they're weird now, we can start, breaking that down. And I think that's and David Graeber's new book, which Jeremy already mentioned, Bullshit Jobs. It's pretty good. I listened to it rather than read it, and I think that that's a perfectly fine way. It's not like Debt, where his book about debt, which you like really have to read, or you're not going to get that much out of. And those are my recommendations.
I am reading. I'm almost done with the book. This Nonviolent Stuff will get you killed, and that's about.
I've heard that title.
It's a good book. It's written by a participant and historian of the civil rights era, and he talks about how there was never a nonviolent movement. It was always deeply intertwined with violence, self-defense mainly, and it's a history of black self-defense in the U.S. and some interesting, amazing stories throughout it, which I like a lot. I watched one episode of the 3% on Netflix.
Oh, I've never heard of that one.
It's watch it.
Okay.
It's a pretty savvy social critique, from what I can tell from an episode.
Okay.
And painful to watch at times. And recently watched Annihilation, the movie.
Yeah, that's Annihilation is good stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty beautiful and scary.
I don't even know what that is.
And there's a reason for that. Yeah.
Is it going to bum me out?
Well, the movie will not. The movie is awesome. The reason why you don't know about it is because I think the movie studio had no fucking clue what to do with it because it was.
Oh, is it strange?
Yeah, it was entirely
on board.
It's the closest thing to Tarkovsky that Hollywood is going to put out for the next 5 years.
Hell yeah! Okay, I'm watching that.
The lead actor is Natalie Portman.
Yes.
Ah, okay, cool.
It is much more cerebral and much more intelligent. I mean, like I said, it's still kind of like it's a Hollywood sci-fi, bits of action, but a shitload more of body horror than you would expect. Oh, do you want to describe any more of it, or?
I was terrified.
It's all right, cool, because it's creepy. Because that means I can get my fiance on board for it. She loves creepy horror.
There's at least three extremely creepy scenes.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm on it.
Yeah.
It's an adaptation of Jeff Vandermeer's the first book of his Southern Reach trilogy.
Okay.
The book version is a mix of Stalker, the Stanislav Lem. That's how you say it, isn't it? Yeah. Book, and also Tarkovsky film mixed with the book is a mix of that and also in H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountain of Madness. The film itself is different than the book, but there are a lot of elements of Stalker still involved.
That's enough. That's good.
It was pretty also.
Yeah. It's good stuff. Yeah, that was the thing. They were talking about how, and I think Red Letter Media even brought this up about how that you had it's weird that the film studio when in their their marketing push for the all lady Ghostbusters stuff, which about a much effectively a much dumber film, like you have all these a full female leading cast, and smart intelligent women doing this stuff, and then kind of fizzling, but then you have the same kind of thing because it's the team that goes into the zone in the film are just it's all women with a varying military or scientific training, and it's very competent in what they do, but the marketing around the film did not emphasize that aspect.
And then it would have been a huge hit if they had done it that way, if they basically marketed it like they did Ghostbusters. Is that what you're saying? Or it was more likely to be a huge hit. How's that?
I think they known how to market it, or had at least attempted to. It was a thing where they put it out in the theaters in America and dumped it on Netflix everywhere else except for the point where it got so much buzz in England and Europe that they started because people would rave about it. It was released on Netflix, and so I might be getting my timeline wrong, but I'm a podcaster. Getting things wrong is my forte. That. The theater, the studio kind of grudgingly put out some theatrical screenings for it. So I agree. Yeah, see Annihilation, preferably with the biggest screen you can, with the best sound system you can.
Yes, it's an instant classic.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited about this, you guys.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's Tarkovsky with body horror.
Hell yeah. Okay. Yep. Here we go.
I will second recommend watching Annihilation. I will also recommend if you might need to fast forward through a couple segments because of the certain directorial choices. Watch Tarkovsky's Stalker.
+1. That's a good movie.
Yeah, the only kick. Tarkovsky himself, Russian film director who wound up because they filmed this film on a section of Estonia that had been used for nuclear testing. And the fact that Tarkovsky himself was a chain smoker, wound up he would be dead within 6 or 7 years of the film coming out. But it is like I said, watch Stalker. It's a classic. I'm not. I'm just trying to think of. No, Stalker is not based off of Stanislav Lem. Solaris is the Tarkovsky film that he adapted from a Stanislav Lem book. Solaris is the one that's set in the...
Stalker's from those... Aren't they brothers?
Yeah. My second recommendation is read Roadside Picnic, especially the uncensored, the version that came out, the later versions, because originally it had been censored by Soviet state censors. Kind of a golden age, late 60s science fiction story about what happens where it's called Roadside Picnic. It's effectively what would happen. It's taken from the point of view of what would happen if a colony of ants discovered like the trash that like a people would leave from a picnic they took on the roadside. Like how would they regard like a candy wrapper or like the ring of a beer can? And now take that and now make that where aliens have sometimes for whatever reason they visited Earth and they've left behind certain things that have kind of changed reality. And how do the humans who live there deal with that? It's also, if you've ever played the Stalker video game series, it ties into that.
Get out of here, Stalker.
But it's also easy to find for free online. Just FYI.
Like I said, read Roadside Picnic, read Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation, go see the film adaptation of Annihilation, see Stalker, and last but not least, also read and see Solaris, both versions. And the book is good too.
So it's the Russian sci-fi themed.
Yes, except Lem was Polish.
Oh, was he? Okay.
But they're all, it's all like, this is all more like Soviet sci-fi. Mm-hmm. And last but not least, for podcast, back to science fiction, there's a kind of I guess you could call it a comedy narrative sci-fi show out of Brooklyn called Mission to Zyxx, Zyxx. It is a mix of. It's a lot of like sci-fi space tropes, a lot of space opera tropes, but there's the story about a crew of ambassadors for either the Federated Alliance, and they go out and like meet different planets to introduce themselves to try to get these people, this alien species to join the Federated Alliance, and it's a mix of like there's the obvious of. Star Trek and Star Wars, but there's a lot of like Red Dwarf and Futurama mixed in too.
500 paces from here.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
If you go over there, you might just fly off into space.
Whoa! Oh, good day to you, sir. Good day, good...
Oh, no!
Oh, no! Did that happen a lot?
I mean, every once in a while,
we've only been here for a few minutes, and that has happened already once while we were staring at this... Oh, no.
It's usually in cases of marital squabbles.
Sure.
I just learned the real meaning of
They could have just learned the real meaning of anything.
Yeah, that's true. That could have been anything at all.
Probably not X-Master.
No.
Right.
So like it's called Mission to Zyxx. It's pretty funny. It's a nice little like they're like 20, 30 to 40 minute episodes based out of a improvised comedy from Brooklyn. So yeah, check it out, Mission to Zyxx. Wrapping everything up, if you want, how can folks find you on the internet?
I'm on Facebook. Friend me, I guess.
There you go.
Shamus Cooke on Facebook or Twitter as well, same name.
I am also on Twitter. I'm at Comrade Garrett. I've been inactive, but sometimes I have bursts of inactivity or bursts of activity.
I'm the same.
In a general bed of inactivity. So you could press your luck, see what happens. Otherwise, I sing for a country and western music band.
What?
I do. We're called Late Shift. I think it's facebook.com/Late Shift Country. There's not a ton of media on there, but there's like a couple of videos and whatnot. So if you live in Portland, you can find out what we're playing, when we're playing, and you can come see us. We're pretty good.
Awesome. And you can find come reach us at the show, like us and subscribe us. Like I said, as always with the standard podcast ask, if you have iTunes, search Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person, 5 stars if you could, leave us a little message, a little review if you could. Thanks to Apple's magical algorithms, that greatly helps people find us. Look us up on Facebook. Also, because we are a modern podcast, we do have a Patreon, if nothing else, just to help with like hosting costs. Find us at, you can support, the continuation of this show for as little as $1 a month. You can find us on patreon.com.
You can't afford $1 a month?
Yeah. You can find it. Find
dirtbag. I'm sorry, Jimmy.
Assholes.
Yeah. find if you can, if you can, kick in, donate or help contribute as little, like I said, you can help us put out the show for as little as $1 a month or more. Feel free to go more, but it's at patreon.com/givingthemic, and all of these links will be in the show notes as usual. And we're on Twitter at Giving the Mic, yada yada yada. All right, this has been a hell of an episode. I want to thank Shamus and Garrett for joining us today. Do we have any last words?
No, just be excellent to one another and party on.
Thanks for having me.
Rock and roll.
It's a pleasure. Yeah.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Hum it, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember the exact way his music goes. Yeah, like that. That's exactly it. Wow.
Let's turn that down.
No, it's a cool sounding thing. It's one of those. It's a chiptune song. Do you know what that is?
Mm-mm.
It's like
little 8-bit video game.
Yeah, it sounds like it's basically video game music, but there's this whole sort of global society of people that have fun using that the engine or whatever they use to generate music for video games to make their own original music. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So if I cuss, can we blank it out later?
If you want.
Well, yeah, or we could not blank it out. Are you worried that your
always
grandmother's going to listen to this episode?
Yeah, people always say, can we cuss in there? And we demand it, so we require it. But
yeah, it's part of our.
I can always,
part of our strategy.
It's the benefit of not broadcasting out to the to real time debutators, because we're going live. Well, not even live to tape. I chop the hell out of the stuff just to kind of fit it into. Can you hear yourself? Or
yeah, I just it's a little low, so I was, but I don't know which one I am.
You are this one on the very end here.
The far end. Okay.
You might want to talk to yourself. Hello.
Check. Okay, cool. I couldn't tell if my gain was too low or if my earphones were too low, and it was the earphones. So.
Right. The benefits of being able to. That's the fun of having a mixer, is you can separate the two. Which is why when I recorded all of the talks last week for day school, I wanted to actually get a mixer for it, because our little PA gear has a line out, but the line out is not really conditioned. So going from that straight into a recorder was a bad idea. Which is why I just had to take the recorder, set there on the little front pew thing, and record from there.
Excuse me.
Can I photograph us, or is that?
Oh, go for it. Yeah,
secret?
That's totally fine. But it's just me and Jeremy. It's
1, 2, 3. Okay, thanks.
That was fun. Yeah. The usual format for the show is, introduce everybody, kick off the subject. At some point, our topics are not exactly all that restrictive. It's kind of our topics are kind of starting point, and we kind of go wherever the conversation goes. Hopefully, once in a while, I try to keep on topic. Also, I got a pen and notes if you want notes or anything.
I'll take a pen.
Actually,
Thank
I
you.
want this pen.
There you go.
Yeah.
But
this is this is what I'm talking about. The government could just buy this company and say, this is the perfect pen. Let's just make this pen, and everyone pays cost or gets them for free. This is the sort of thing I'm talking about.
Well, here, if you actually, what's interesting about that pen, click it for a minute, and I think does it have a round pointer? And that is actually not even a perfect pen. That's I Frankenstein that pen together out of another little Pentel.
What have you done?
It's actually better. It's better than the original version.
Damn, what a guy! All right,
yay! It's fun being an engineer. Everything is, the world can be improved. Rough format is, I think, for today's show, because I just want to do one just effectively organizing 101, because it's one of those things that a lot of people talk about and nobody actually knows, and in one of the neat things about Jane McAlevey's book is she actually spells out the difference between organizing, advocacy, and activism. Because I think, especially for the last 25 years, they've effectively been synonymous. It's one of the things I like about her book is that she actually...
Can you recall the breakdown of those, Jeremy?
Yes, and we'll do so in the show. But I guess just kind of do this like an intro educational session for folks.
Sure. Yeah.
One of the other topics I wanted to go about later, as I mentioned, like last week, is how do you how do you use something like an Occupy camp to organize people with, or where can you go from once you get this mass? How do you try to start to orientate people who come out for this huge mass emotional event towards something a bit more coherent than like a bunch of like rad lib lifestylist kids?
That's perfect. Yeah.
And then somewhere in there near the end, we ask folks for like recommendations and endorsements. So it's like whatever you've been digging that you want to like share with people, which is everything from, I think at one point, Garrett endorsed the line of guitars that he just started playing. I mentioned stuff like, everything from like a new Assad Hader book to, I think Wolfenstein 2, because I'd been playing that at the time. So it's kind of like, it's effectively, what have you been digging on that you want other people to find out about? And we go for, do you have any like hard outs for your time?
No.
Okay, cool. We go until we're done, which usually go, I don't know, like 90 minutes ish.
Yeah, that's about right. I would say so.
90 minutes with breaks.
Okay.
It's kind of just how the, a lot of it is just like how the conversation flows.
I don't have a hard out, Jeremy, but I'd like to be done by 8:30.
Okay, what time is it? It is 6:20.
That gives us 2 hours 10.
Okay, that should be enough.
I'm a pretty succinct person.
Good.
Great. Then we'll be out of here in 35 minutes.
That is excellent because I am not.
You can carry us then.
Yeah. Well, it's that's the kicker. It's one of the things.
Well, I'm good at asking questions because I have the
good.
The persona of I'm not. Well, it's not a persona. It's like I'm not ashamed to admit when I don't know something, and so I don't mind asking.
Sure.
So I like to ask questions. So I think hopefully that won't become tedious, but I try to take the perspective of someone listening that might not understand. They might not be hep to whatever is going on.
Perfect.
And then in whatever way I'm not hep, I like to get that information too.
All right, hang on a second. I'm just going to play this back for a minute.